Hey everyone, and welcome back to the PTG Rail Routes Learning Series for Train Simulator. On today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the Western Main Line's route with the South Devon Main Line extension, and I'm going to be driving a journey between Bristol Temple Meads and Plymouth, which is a distance of just under 128 miles. The scenario that I'm using is one that I've custom created specifically for this video, and we will be following the real-life timetable of train 1 Charlie 11, which is the 6:34 AM service from Bristol Temple Meads to Plymouth, calling at Taunton, Tiverton Parkway, Exeter St, Newton Abbot, and Totnes along the way. The train that I'm going to be driving on this journey today is a Class 221 Super Voyager operated by Cross Country. The Super Voyagers are part of the Voyager family of diesel-electric multiple units constructed by Bombardier Transportation between 2001 and 2002. A total of 44 of these units were built, formed of 4 or 5 coaches per set, though most sets are formed of 5 coaches. They have a maximum in-service speed of 125 miles per hour, though the maximum speed we will be able to get up to on this journey today is 110 miles per hour. They do have a tilting system fitted, but the tilting system is not operational on this route. And the engines used in these trains is actually one engine under each coach, and each engine is rated at 750 horsepower, giving a maximum total power output of 3,750 horsepower per 5-coach train. The total weight of each unit is 227 tons. Now in the cab of the Voyager, there's a few things that I need to do to set up the unit ready for departure. The first thing I'm going to do is to insert the master key just by clicking on it and then dragging it into the slot there. And now that I've done that, I'm going to move the reversing handle into the neutral position. So you can see the reversing handle there just above the combined traction and brake controller. As I did that, I then reset the AWS self-test sequence, and when I put the unit into forward, then I'm also going to have to reset the driver's safety device. The next thing I'm going to do is to set up the headlights and marker lights, so you can see the switch in front of us there. I'm just going to click on it, and I've just moved that to the day setting there. So now we've got the headlights on the front of the train set to the day setting, and it's also turned on the tail lights at the rear of the train to ensure that they are both showing red. Now if we go around the cab here, I'm not doing a cold start in the Voyager today just because it's a bit complicated to go through, and I'd rather save that for a train guide video in the future. But I just wanted to go through some of the controls here. So you can see there to the left hand side of the screen the brake gauges. The needle on the right hand side is the brake cylinder pressure gauge, so the higher that is pointing, then the harder the brakes are applied, and when that is pointing to 0, then the brakes are fully released. Next thing I'm going to do here is just to turn off the driver reminder appliance, as I do know that the signal ahead is clear. Now if we continue around the cab here, we've got the speedometer there measured in miles per hour, and then just as we go a bit further to the right, you can see the tilt authorization and speed supervision system. Now what I'm going to do with this system here is just click on the tilt isolate button to ensure that tilt is not authorized on this journey, and so the train will not start to try and tilt as we enter curves. Now if we continue down here, you can see some more controls, and what I want to do now is turn on the instrument lighting switch just by turning that up. So now you can see the instrument lights have illuminated, which is particularly useful when we're travelling into tunnels. Now if we continue here, we've got the horn control next to us. I do have the Armstrong Powerhouse sound pack installed, so the horn sounds slightly differently to the default horn that comes with this unit. And so it's a 2-tone horn controlled with the spacebar and the B key. Now that we've had a look at the horn control, I'm just going to go back over here just to point out the combined traction and brake controller. So with this handle here, if it's in the off position, then we're not applying power and the brakes are fully released. As you pull the handle towards you, it does apply power, and in real life you can see that there are 4 notches of power on this unit. However, this power handle hasn't actually been set up as a notched power handle in Train Simulator, so I can just move it very smoothly. If I just move it there, you can see that I'm moving it very smoothly rather than in notches. So that's not quite prototypical operation, I don't believe. And then if you push it away from you, the brakes are also quite smooth, so I can apply the brakes quite precisely to try and slow the train down. Another thing to mention about the braking in this unit is that the default brakes I feel are not good enough compared to reality. If you apply the brakes before you get down to 60 miles per hour, the braking is very slow indeed, even on a maximum brake application, and it could take over 1.5 miles to stop from 100 miles per hour, which seems very poor performance from a modern train. So I have downloaded a brake fix from UK Train Sim, and I'll put the link to that in the description of this video. It certainly allows you to brake much more precisely and much more quickly, and I feel that it's just more prototypical to how the brakes would work in real life. So the next thing I'm going to do now is just to head outside and change the destination displays, and then we should be ready to depart and head out towards Plymouth. Looking at the front of the train here, if I now press Ctrl and F12, you can see that a destination has just come up there of Aberdeen. So I'm just going to keep pressing that to scroll through the list of destinations until we reach Plymouth, so that this is set up correctly for our journey. We're going past Leamington Spa there, Leeds, Liverpool, London Euston, Manchester, Newcastle, Newquay, Nottingham, Oxford, Paynton, Penzance and Plymouth. So the destination display is now all set up, and the train is all set up ready for departure out towards Plymouth. Departing Bristol Temple Meads, the starting speed limit is 25 miles per hour, and at this point we've got just under 45 miles to go to our first stop, which is Taunton. As we approach 25 miles per hour, I'm just going to cut the power back and then idle the power to allow the train to coast until we can accelerate further. One thing that I hope you'll notice in this video is that it seems I've finally managed to deal with the horrendous recording lag problem that I've had in in 2 recent videos, both of them actually German videos, where I've encountered some quite significant lag while recording, which hasn't been present when I've just been playing the game. And it's just due to the way that I'd actually set up the recording software and the codec that I was using. So I am now using a codec that runs the processing through the graphics card, which has significantly helped to improve performance, and I should now get a much more stable 30 frames per second. The speed limit here has now just gone up to 90 miles per hour, and I can accelerate towards that in a moment now, just as we reach this second speed post on the right hand side. I've now gone up to full power to start accelerating up towards 90. We're now passing Bedminster Station. Some lag is always to be expected in Train Simulator, particularly as the game loads new objects further away, so there will still be some lag noticeable on this journey, but it should hopefully be a lot less severe than it was before. We're now passing Parson Street Station. The speed limit is now going up to 100 miles per hour, and that's the ruling speed limit for the majority of the journey between here and Exeter. As we get to 100 miles per hour, I'm then going to pull the power handle back to the idle position, and then I'm going to apply a low amount of power to try and maintain the speed. One of the difficulties of being able to do that in this particular unit is that I can't see the power handle at all, and as it's not a notched power handle, I'm not sure the exact position to put it in to try and maintain a particular speed, so it's all a bit of trial and error here to try and work out what I need to do. The power handle is now in the idle position. In a moment I will start increasing the power once the speed has fallen to around 97 to 98 miles per hour. So the speed has now fallen a little there, so I'm just going to go into a small amount of power, and hopefully that will maintain the speed at around this level. We're now passing the site of what I believe is the now closed Flaxbourton station, which was closed to passengers in 1963. We're now coming up on Nailsea and Backwell station with 37 miles to go to Taunton. now coming up on Tiverton Station. I see that we have a double yellow light there, so I'm now going to idle the power and just brake very lightly to start bringing our speed down, just to ensure that we won't have any signals passed at danger. I'm going to keep a close eye on the signals now, just to see what happens, as that was a double yellow and the signals are quite well spaced here. I should have plenty of time to stop for a red signal, should I need to do so. It looks like the signal ahead is now displaying a single yellow aspect, indeed it is, so I'm now going to continue to slow down until I can stop within sight distance of any red lights. One of the problems that I find on this route is actually that it's very difficult to see the signals until you're almost on top of them, so I'm actually not going to be able to see this signal until I'm quite close, so I do want to make sure that I've slowed down to around 30 miles an hour to make sure that I'm able to stop at any red signals in time. Now just going to release the brakes at 40 miles an hour actually, and just allow the train to continue to coast for now. As soon as I can see the next signal is looming, then I will apply the brakes until I can see what aspect it is displaying. I think I can just see a red light in the distance, so I am now braking to slow down for that. I can now clearly see that that is a red signal, so I've got the brakes on to ensure that I can stop in time in front of that signal. And so now I'm just going to brake lightly and try to crawl up to the signal in the hopes that I won't have to stop. It's looking likely that I may have to. So we're following at the minute a slightly delayed train which is heading into Weston-super-Mare, and the route to Weston-super-Mare turns off in a minute just after the next station, which is Whirl. And so once the train has turned off onto the Weston-super-Mare branch, then we should be fully clear and under green lights once again. So we're just going to sit this signal for a moment, just until it clears. So the signal has now just jumped to a single yellow, so I'm going to get the train moving and head towards Whirl Station. The next signal, I believe, is just the other side of the station at Whirl. And then as soon as the train has cleared that signal section and crossed onto the other track, the signals should then jump to green. For now, I'm just going to accelerate to around 40 miles per hour and then shut off the power and allow the train to coast until I can see the next signal. I can now see that the next signal is displaying a green aspect, so I'm now going up to full power to accelerate back up towards the line speed of 100 miles per hour. The station we're now passing through is Whirl, and at this point we've got around 28 3/4 miles to go to Taunton. We're now passing Whirl Junction with the branch to Weston-super-Mare diverging to the right. Now that we're back up to 100 miles per hour, I just shut off the power and then increase the power handle very slightly, just to give us a little bit of power to try and maintain this speed. In a moment, the branch from Weston-super-Mare will be rejoining us on the right-hand side, and the speed limits will be going up to 110 miles per hour, which is the maximum speed limit for this journey. The speed limit has now gone up to 110. However, there is a slight bug with this train for some reason on the tilt authorization and speed supervision system, that if I go above 105 miles per hour, then the red light on that system will illuminate, and when it does, if I don't stop accelerating, then the train will actually apply the brakes to bring my speed back down again. So for some reason it seems to think that I'm speeding if I'm doing more than around 105 miles per hour. So I'll demonstrate that now. The red light has now come on the TASS system, and if I just leave it and allow the train to continue accelerating, You'll see that the brakes will apply themselves in a moment, and they'll bring my speed back down to around 100 miles per hour before releasing. So we're actually at the speed limit now, so I've just had to cut the power back for a moment to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit. And now the train has just applied the brakes itself, and now that we're down to around 100, the brakes have released, and now I can start accelerating once again. So what I'm going to aim to do is just try and have a target speed here of 105 miles per hour. Which seems a reasonable speed to be travelling along this section. This 110 mile per hour section is around 10 to 15 miles long, and it's the only section of this speed limit on the entire journey. We're now coming up on Highbridge and Burnham Station with 18 miles to go. Now got a warning for a speed limit change back down to 100 miles per hour, which is only a third of a mile from the speed limit itself. So just applied some very light braking to bring our speed down, and we're now entering the 100 mile per hour speed zone. We're now coming up on Bridgewater Station with 11 3/4 miles to go to Taunton. The next major landmark along here, which should be coming up quite shortly now, is Coglow Junction. At Coglow Junction, the line from Reading via Westbury joins us. It's actually a shortcut for trains travelling from London Paddington down through to Exeter and Plymouth and onwards towards Penzance. Shaves, I think, about an hour off the journey versus going via Bristol Temple Meads. So at Coglow Junction, the line from Westbury joins us, and at that point we've then got 4.5 miles to go to Taunton, and I'm going to have to start counting signals to ensure that I know the correct braking point to slow down for our stop. We're now coming up on Cogload Junction, so once we reach the point just ahead, we've then got 4.5 miles to go. And from that point I'm going to start counting signals, and I'm going to apply the brakes at the third signal after Cogload Junction. So at the next signal we pass, we've then got 3.5 miles to go to Taunton. At the following signal, we've then got 2.25 miles to go. And at the third signal, we've then got 3/4 mile to go to a 60 mph speed limit, which is a speed change coming into force before our arrival at Taunton. So the first signal is coming up just now, marking 3.5 miles to go. We're now coming up on the second signal, marking 2.25 miles to go and 1.5 miles to go to an upcoming 60 mph speed limit. At the next signal, the third signal, we've then got just over 3/4 mile to go to that limit. I'm going to start applying the brakes just after we've passed the next signal. So I am now braking to bring our speed down. The 60 mph speed limit comes into force just after we've passed the next signal. Just increasing the braking slightly there. We are now down to 60 mph in time. In fact, we may have slowed down slightly too early there. Now giving us a low amount of power to try and maintain the speed momentarily. And now, just after we've crossed the point here, I'm now going to idle the power and start applying the brakes as we round this right-hand curve, and the station should be coming into sight in a moment. One of the problems I found with this route is I couldn't see any clear stop markers for 5-car Voyager sets, so I'm having to sort of guess the stopping point, and I'm going to aim to stop around halfway along the platform. And so I feel this should probably be about the right place to stop. Departing away from Taunton, the starting speed limit is 60 mph, though very quickly dropping down to 50 mph. And at this point we've got just over 14 miles to go to our next stop, which is Tiverton Parkway. As soon as we've crossed this point here and we're back onto the main line, the speed limit is now going straight back up to 100 miles per hour. We're now passing Fairwater Yard on the left-hand side. Unfortunately, you may notice that the yards on this route, I've had to leave them empty. It was just to try and help the frame rate and ensure stability in this scenario, as the Western Main Line's route is notoriously unstable and does like crashing out randomly, so the less trains you see the better. Although all AI trains from the timetable have been placed in that you'll see passing us, it's just the yards and static traffic which is lacking. We're now passing the site of Norton Fitzwarren, which is actually the start of the West Somerset Railway. And if you're interested in learning more about the West Somerset Railway, then please see my route guide video, which is actually a documentary video I've made about the West Somerset Railway and the history of the route. Once again, now we're at 100 miles per hour. I've gone to a low power setting to try and maintain the speed. There are a few different gradient changes along here which may affect my speed, so I do need to keep an eye on that. The steepest gradient we're going to have is up 1 in 90. Just increased the power a bit there, as I felt we just lost a little bit too much speed. So I'm just trying to bring us back up to 100 before cutting the power down. I can now see that we're accelerating, so I'm just pulling the power handle back once again. I'm just going to keep an eye on that to make sure that we don't gain or lose too much speed. I believe we are currently on an uphill gradient, as I'm actually having to use quite a high power setting to try and hold this speed. Looks like we are slowly creeping back up towards 100 now. There will be a tunnel coming up shortly, and once we reach the other end of the tunnel, we've then got 3.5 miles to go to Tiverton Parkway. And as we come out the tunnel at the other side, we're going from an uphill gradient straight onto a downward gradient of 1 in 115. So I'm going to coast along at that point and may even need to use the brakes to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. So we're now coming up on the tunnel that I mentioned. Now that we've entered the tunnel, I've just idled the power to allow the train to coast along here. We may lose a little bit of speed for a moment, but that will soon be regained on the other side of the tunnel once we're on the downhill section. So at the next signal that we pass after the tunnel, we've then got 2 miles to go to Tiverton Parkway, and at the following signal we've got 1.25 miles to go, and I'm aiming to apply the brakes just after that following second signal. So at this signal we now have 2 miles to go to Tiverton Parkway, and I'm now looking out for the next signal so I can put on the brakes just after. Now applying the brakes up to 40% on the gauge below the speedometer, and that should be about the right brake force to bring our speed down nicely for our stop. Now just releasing the brakes a little as I feel that we are slowing down just a little bit too quickly. I can now see the platform coming up just ahead. I'm going to aim to enter the platform at no faster than around 30 miles per hour. As a stopping point, I'm going to aim to stop just beyond the shelter that you can see there on the left-hand side. And so this should hopefully be about the right place to stop. Departing Tiverton Parkway, the starting speed limit is still 100 miles per hour, and at this point we've got just over 16.5 miles to go to our next stop, which is Exeter St David's. We're now passing Tiverton Loops with around 14.75 miles to go to our next stop. As we're now approaching 100 miles per hour once again, I'm now pulling the power handle back to a low setting to try and maintain this speed. So I just wanted to say that coming up after this video, my hopefully next two planned videos will be Newcastle to York in a Class 91 set. I'll be driving from the DVT end, of course, which is the correct end for driving in that direction, followed by, I'm hoping, finally to get the Marias Pass route covered, which is a full run of the route between Shelby and Whitefish in an Amtrak train. I think it takes around 3.5 hours, so it will be by far my biggest video to date. That's one of the reasons why it's taken me so long to get around to it, because there's so much I've had to do to prepare for that video, with making notes and trying to practice driving the routes. I'm also compiling the questions that you've asked me to try and answer them in that video. And if there's any other questions that anyone would like to add, please do let me know in the comments. There's still a couple of days left before I will get around to recording that, but I'm hoping to record both of those two videos within the next few days. And then following that, I'm going to see where we go from there. There's quite a few videos I'd like to make this summer. I'm just not sure on the order that I'm going to record and release them in yet. And that includes also hopefully a couple of train guides and a route guide. And I am still looking at doing a US signalling guide, so we're going to have to see what happens with that too. There's also a couple of new routes I'm hoping to get hold of for Train Simulator, and a couple of new trains which will enable me to demonstrate some newer content. And I also recently bought a German route from Virtual Railroads, which is the route from Konstanz to Villingen, and I think that that would be a really good route to make a video on. It's certainly a very high quality route. It feels up to Armstrong Powerhouse standard, I would say, just from driving it. So I'm quite excited to be able to make a video on that route at some point in the near future. What I'm currently looking out for along here is a girder bridge that we're going to cross. Once we reach that bridge, we've then got around 3 miles to go to Exeter, and that also marks 1 1/3 miles to go to a speed limit reduction down to 80 miles per hour. I can now see the girder bridge coming up just here. So at this bridge, as already mentioned, we've got 3 miles to go to Exeter St David's, and 1 1/3 miles to go to an upcoming 80 mile per hour speed limit. At this signal, we've got just under a mile to go to that limit. I'm going to see a warning board in a moment that says 65 on it, but should say 80. I'm going to apply the brakes now. We just reached the warning board here, so I'm now going to start braking for the upcoming 80 limit. There is a further speed drop down to 65 miles per hour coming up after the 80, but that first Morpeth board should say 80 and not 65. now have a second Morpeth board here, warning us of the upcoming 65 mile per hour speed limit. So I'm just continuing to brake now below 80 down to 65, and then I'm going to allow the train to coast once we're doing 65 miles per hour. So we're now coasting at 65. As we enter the 65 mile per hour speed zone, we've then got 1 mile to go to an upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit. Now joining us from the right hand side is the route from Barnstaple. We're now passing Exeter Riverside Yard on the right hand side, and we now have a Morpeth board warning for the upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit, so I'm now applying the brakes to bring our speed down to 30 in time. So we've now entered the 30 mile per hour speed zone. In a moment we're going to cross a 6-track level crossing. It's quite a famous level crossing here at Exeter St David's Station. And then we're going to enter the platform, and I'm going to aim to stop at the 2 and 4 car stop sign near the end of the platform. I think I might have overshot the sign there just very slightly. We should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing Exeter St David's, the starting speed limit is 30 miles per hour, and at this point we've got just over 20 miles to go to our next stop, which is Newton Abbot. Just idling the power at 30 miles per hour there, and accidentally applied the brakes very slightly. I've now brought the power handle back down to idle again until we can accelerate further. The speed limit here is now going up to 75 miles per hour, and I can accelerate up towards 75 at the signal you can see there on the right hand side. I am now in full power and accelerating up towards the new speed limit. We're now coming up on Exeter St Thomas Station. The speed limit here is now going up to 100 miles per hour, and this is the last 100 mile per hour section that we're going to have on this journey into Plymouth. As we reach 100 miles per hour, I'm once again going to now go into a low power setting to try and maintain the speed. What I'm looking out for along here now is a Morpeth board warning for an upcoming 75 mile per hour speed limit. There is no AWS at this Morpeth board, so I've got to keep a close eye out for that, as that's the indicator for the next speed change. Then I'm going to apply the brakes for that upcoming 75 speed limit at the next signal after we've passed that Morpeth board. We've now passed the Morpeth board for the upcoming 75 mile per hour speed limit, and we're now coming up on the signal just here, so I'm now going to apply the brakes and start slowing for the upcoming 75. We're now down to 75 miles per hour just in time there, so we're now entering the 75 mile per hour speed zone. At this point we've got around 13 miles to go to Newton Abbot. I'm currently just in a very low power setting trying to maintain this speed, but I'm also keeping a close eye on our speed, so I will adjust the power if necessary to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limits. So our speed was just crawling up slightly there. I have now idled the power once again. Now speed should start falling back. We're now coming up on Starcross Station. now running alongside the coast of the English Channel for a few miles. This is actually the Riviera line that we're now following, which of course is available as a separate add-on for Train Simulator from Dovetail Games, and that runs just between Exeter and Paynton, with the route to Paynton turning off around the area of Newton Abbot, which is our next stop. The speed limit has just gone up to 80 miles per hour, so I've just increased the power to bring us up towards that. And then I'm going to have to slow down again for another speed change as we reach Dawlish Warren Station, which is the next station that we pass through. Now that we're doing 80 miles per hour, I've just idled the power to allow the train to coast along here. And as we're passing through Dawlish Warren Station, I'm then going to apply the brakes for an upcoming 70 mile per hour speed limit. We're now coming up on Dawlish Warren. We're now down to 70 miles per hour in time for the start of the speed limit on this curve here. And then just after this curve, the speed limit will be increasing to 75 miles per hour before dropping again at Dawlish Station, which is the next station that we're going to pass through. So the speed limit's just increased to 75 now. I'm going to give us a bit of power just for a moment. And then as we approach Dawlish Station, I've got to brake for an upcoming 60 mile per hour speed limit. The power handle is now in idle, and at this overbridge just here we've got half a mile to go to the upcoming 60, so I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment. I've now got the brakes on to slow us down gently to 60 miles per hour. We're currently running along the Dawlish seawall, a part of which actually collapsed a few years ago and had to be extensively repaired due to some very stormy weather in this part of England. We're now passing Dawlish Station. We're now passing through the first of a series of tunnels along here, this one being the 205-yard long Kennoway Tunnel, which is closely followed by the 227-yard long Coreyton Tunnel. We're now passing the 49-yard long Fillet Tunnel, followed by the 58-yard long Clark's Tunnel, and then finally we're going to pass through the 521-yard long Parsons Tunnel. The signal here is displaying a single yellow aspect, so I do now need to start applying the brakes. I noticed there I did also accidentally creep up in speed slightly as I was just reading my notes there to remind me which tunnel was which and which length each tunnel is. So I'm now just braking down as we passed a single yellow signal there to ensure that I am able to stop at a red if required to do so. The speed limit here has just gone up to 75 miles per hour, around half a mile from the next signal, so I'm just going to allow the train to coast along here at 30 miles per hour. If the signals were clear, then we would only have 1 mile to an upcoming 60 mile per hour speed limit, so I often don't really accelerate much as the speed limit goes up to 75, due to how quickly I've got to slow down again for the upcoming 60 speed limit. I can now see the signal ahead is displaying a yellow aspect, so I am now going to increase the power and bring our speed up a little. I'm now going to idle the power at around 45 miles per hour and not accelerate above that. The speed limit is now dropping back down to 60 miles per hour, and we've got around a third of a mile to go to the next signal. So I'm just applying the brakes here to bring our speed down and ensure that I can stop if required to do so. We're now coming up on Teignmouth station. That was a rather bumpy bit of track there, I must say. I would certainly hope that that wasn't like that in real life. Well, I certainly know it isn't. I think in real life, in fact, you might end up derailing if you ended up hitting a bump quite like that on the track. So I see the signal here is displaying a green aspect, so I'm going up to full power to start accelerating up towards the 60 mile per hour speed limit. At this point at Starcross station, we've got 5¼ miles to go to Newton Abbot. I've just temporarily idled the power at 60 miles per hour to allow the train to coast. The speed limit along here will be going up further in a moment to 80 and then 90 miles per hour. So the speed limit here is now going up to 80, however we do have a single yellow signal, so I'm now going to apply the brakes to bring our speed down so I can once again stop within sight distance of any red signals. The speed limit is now going up to 90 miles per hour, though I still won't be able to accelerate up to that at this point. I can see that the next signal is displaying a yellow aspect, so I'm now accelerating just a little bit to bring us up to around 45 miles per hour. Then once again I'm going to just idle the power and allow the train to coast. I'm not sure exactly where the next signal is positioned, so I'm now just braking very lightly to bring my speed down again, just to ensure that there's going to be no surprises where the signal might just spring up from me around the curve where I can't quite see it. So we're now cruising along at a very comfortable and gentle 30 miles per hour. I'm still trying to look out for the next signal ahead to see what aspect it is displaying. I'm in fact now just going to give us a small amount of power, as I feel we might be slowing down slightly too much. I don't want to slow down below 30 until I can see the next signal and make sure that it is displaying a red aspect first. I can now see that the next signal is in fact displaying a green aspect, so I've immediately gone up to full power to start accelerating up towards line speed, though I know that I won't be able to get up to 90 miles per hour before I've got to start slowing down again, as there will be a 60 mile per hour speed restriction coming up soon, and we're going to get a warning for that 2/3 of a mile from the limit itself. So we're now passing the warning just here. For some reason the AWS gives me a green bing rather than a normal AWS warning. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to not accelerate above 60 miles per hour. I just idle the power at this point, and I will give us a low amount of power if necessary, just to ensure that we don't lose too much speed. The 60 mile per hour speed limit has now come into force, and at this point we've got 1 1/3 miles to go to Newton Abbot. We're now passing Hackney sidings on the left hand side, and I'm going to start applying the brakes for our stop on the next left hand curve. So we're now entering the curve here, and I've now got the brakes on to bring our speed down. We should be able to see the platforms at Newton Abbot in a moment. In fact, I can just see them coming up now. So I'm aiming to enter the platform at no faster than around 30 miles per hour. Here at Newton Abbot station, I'm aiming to stop near the end of the platform roof. And so hopefully this should be about the right place to stop. Departing away from Newton Abbot, the starting speed limit is 60 miles per hour, and at this point we've got around 8 3/4 miles to go to our next stop, which is Totnes. From this point we now leave the coast behind, and we're actually going to be going through the Devon Hills. So the hills along here are quite significant, and when the railway was built through here it required quite a winding, curvy route, and it involves a lot of gradient changes. So this is probably the most challenging section of the route to drive, even though we've got the lowest speed limits of any part of the route. In fact, for most of the journey now to Plymouth, the maximum speed limit we're going to have is 60 miles per hour. I'm now in a low power setting at 60 miles per hour, just trying to maintain the speed here. In a moment we're going to turn to the right, and the line towards Taunton, the Riviera line, is going to diverge to the left. So see, I just creeped up to around 62 miles per hour for a moment there, so I just applied the brakes just to bring our speed back down under 60 again. So we're now diverging away from the Taunton line. And in a moment we're going to be on a climbing gradient of around 1 in 98 after this sharp right curve here. We're now beginning the first of a number of climbs. As already mentioned, this is a 1 in 98 upward gradient, and at this point we've got around 1 mile to go to an upcoming 55 mile per hour speed limit. So I'm just going to look out for a warning board for that speed limit now, and then I will idle the power and I'll just allow the train to coast down to 55. We're now passing the 55 mile per hour warning board, which is just over a third of a mile from the speed limit itself. So I'm now just going to cut the power back. And the train has now coasted down to 55 miles per hour. So I'm now going to add some power to ensure that we don't lose too much speed along here. And we're now entering the 55 mile per hour speed zone. The gradient here is now going to shallow just before we enter this tunnel, and then shortly after the tunnel we're going to be on a down 1 in 37 grade, so I am going to need to use the brakes to control my speed. In fact, I just slipped up to around 56 for a moment there, so just pulled that back down to 55 miles per hour. And now at this point we're starting on the downward gradient, so I've immediately put the brakes on to try and control our speed on this descent. At this point we've now got around 4.5 miles to go to Totnes. At this signal, we've now got just over 3¼ miles to go to our stop. The gradient has now shallowed and levelled out a bit, so I'm just giving us a little bit of power now. So we'd slowed down to around 50 miles per hour, so I just wanted to bring us back up towards 55. We now have a diverging route aspect signal on a flashing single yellow, so that indicates that we will be turning off this line, in fact, onto the track for the platform at Totnes, because at Totnes the platforms are on outer tracks with the two main tracks bypassing the station. So that signal there was 1½ miles from the next signal. The speed limit along here is about to go up to 60 miles per hour. And then as we approach the next signal, we're approaching a 45 mile per hour speed limit, so I'm going to have to start braking for that just after we've passed the next signal. The speed limit has now gone up to 60 miles per hour, so I am just going to accelerate towards that for a moment, as we do have a little bit of time before I've got to start braking for Totnes station. At this signal, we've now got ½ mile to go to the upcoming 45 mile per hour speed limit. I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment just as we're crossing this point just here. So I've now got the brakes on to bring our speed down to 45. You can now see Totnes station coming up just ahead, so I've now got the brakes on to bring our speed off a bit more. Once again, aiming to enter the platform at no faster than around 30 miles per hour. And here at Totnes, I'm aiming to stop near the end of the platform. And so hopefully this should be about the right place to stop. Departing Totnes, the starting speed limit is immediately down to 25 miles per hour for the junction coming up just here, and at this point we've got 23 miles to go to our next and final stop on this journey, which is Plymouth. Just temporarily idled the power at 25 miles per hour just until we can accelerate further. The speed limit here has now gone up to 60 miles per hour, so I'm going to accelerate towards that just as we've passed under this overbridge here. So I'm now going up to full power to bring our speed up towards 60. At this point we're now on a climbing gradient of 1 in 129. The 1 in 129 gradient that we're currently on is going to steepen further to 1 in 66, and then even further still to 1 in 47. You can tell quite easily here that we are on quite a steep climbing gradient just looking at how quickly we're accelerating. So I am in full power, and as you can see we're really not accelerating very quickly at all due to the gradient that we're currently on. As we've now reached 60 miles per hour, I'm just pulling the power handle back a little just to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit. Now I've just got to keep an eye on the speedometer there and just adjust the power handle to try and maintain the speed as close to 60 as possible. The gradient here has just changed, so I've just idled the power for a moment to ensure that we don't break the speed limit and see what happens to our speed in idle power. Now just added just a tiny bit of power there to try and ensure we don't lose too much speed. It seems that we are now on a level gradient. Now passing through a tunnel here where we're going to have a very strange light effect happen in a moment. If it happens again like it did on my test run through this route. And this is it here. We're suddenly being lit up in the cab in the middle of the tunnel. And then in a moment it will get fully dark again. So I'm not quite sure why that is, but it seems that somehow the way that they built the tunnel in the route editor, it's letting some light in to illuminate the cab a bit. What I'm looking out for along here now is a set of crossover points, which we should be passing soon. At those crossover points, we've then got 15.5 miles to go to Plymouth. Along this section now we've got several small minor gradient changes between up, level and down, so I've just got to keep an eye on the speedometer to try and make sure that I can maintain the speed as close to 60 as possible, braking where necessary and increasing the power also where necessary. We're now passing the crossover points that I mentioned, so we've now got 15.5 miles to go to Plymouth. We're now passing Ivy Bridge Station. At Ivy Bridge we had just over 11.5 miles to go to Plymouth. What I'm next looking out for along here now is an increase in the speed limit to 80 miles per hour. At that point we will have just under 7 miles to go to Plymouth, and it's at the start of a long down gradient, as steep as 1 in 42 in places, so it's a place where I can allow the train to coast up to the speed limit. The speed limit is now increasing to 80 miles per hour, as mentioned at the start of a downward gradient here. So I'm just going to leave the power handle in the idle position and allow the train to coast up to 80 miles per hour. And then once we reach 80, I'm going to have to use the brakes to control our speed. So I have now got the brakes on to try and control our speed, and I'm just going to keep adjusting the brake settings to do that. At this signal we've got 1 3/4 miles to go to the next signal, so there's quite a lot of signal spacing here. I do have to bear in mind that that was a double yellow signal. Now what I'm looking out for along here is a warning for an upcoming 60 mile per hour speed limit. The warning board doesn't have an AWS, so I've really got to keep a close eye out for that. The Morpeth board is half a mile from the speed limit itself, so as we pass the Morpeth board, I'm then going to apply the brakes to slow to 60 miles per hour. We have now reached the Morpeth board warning for the upcoming 60, so I'm now going to apply the brakes to bring that speed off and ensure that we do slow down to 60 miles per hour in time. So we're now down to 60 miles per hour. We're entering the 60 mile per hour speed zone here, and at this point we've got around 3 miles to go to Plymouth. The speed limit is now going up to 70 miles per hour, around 1 1/3 miles from an upcoming 60 mile per hour speed limit. Just for a moment though, I'm going to accelerate up to 70, and then as soon as we hit 70 miles per hour, I'm going to idle the train and allow the train to coast. Power handle is now back in idle, and at this point the train should coast down to 60 miles per hour. On the left hand side just here is Lara Depot, which is the main HST depot in Plymouth. So we're now down to 60 miles per hour in time. We're now passing the 60 board, though we've got a warning there for an upcoming 55 limit, which is half a mile away. So I'm just going to idle the power here and make sure that the train coasts down to 55. Once we pass the 55 speed board, we've then got just under half a mile to go to an upcoming 25 speed limit. So we've now got just under half a mile to go to an upcoming 25 limit. We now have a warning for that speed limit coming into force, with the speed limit coming into force at the other end of this tunnel just coming up. So we're now down to 25 miles per hour, though I'm going to continue to slow to around 20 here. And the reason for that is because we are currently on a downhill grade, so the train is quickly picking up speed back up towards 25, and I want to ensure that I can control the speed here. In fact, I now need to apply some braking once again to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. Arriving into Plymouth station here, I'm aiming to stop around the area of the buffer stops in the siding to our right hand side here. And so if we stop here, I'm hoping that this should be about the right place to stop. And here we are, arrival at Plymouth. Thank you very much for watching this video. I very much hope that you have enjoyed it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please don't forget that for the latest channel updates, you can find me on Facebook, and I've put the link to my Facebook page in the description of this video. And also, if you'd like to sponsor anything towards this channel, then please visit my Patreon page for more information, the link of which is also in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.